Hey, this is John Nathan, and we are back with Your Therapy's Showing, and we're discussing, um, uh, we're shifting our focus from our subject matter experts of our previous conversation, who, through the poetic stylings and rhythmic genius of Miss Doechii and Snoop Dogg, offering us intelligence about their wisdoms, and through time and through explanation, where we can identify moments of therapy technique or of therapeutic thinking. It's different from knowledge and street smart and wisdom. And knowing that there is an opportunity and an option to know the difference or to spot the difference or to perhaps interpret what might be similar to something that you might consider to be wise or smart or intelligent in thought or action, that we might not know could be someone's therapy work that allowed for that decision, as opposed to the knowledge or the experience or the wisdom. It's something that we want to identify as part of our meal of mindful emotional awareness. It's like, if you notice it, that might not be something that they're working on. That might just be their personality. That might be their behavior. And to know that that is a discernment that's worth looking into, we bring forward for this week our subject matter experts of Miss Doja Cat and Miss Snow the Product, who's also Claudia, but she goes by Snow in her persona. And our playlist will be riddled with their amazing interpretations of music and style and song and dance, and rap and poetry and flow, but also they Miss Snow the Product speaks specifically on ADHD, on her emotional state. Miss Doja Cat shows through her poetry and through her intelligence that she has cognitive flexibility, that she's given you the option, that she's letting you know that she's taken the option, and that you might want to let her let her figure some stuff out before you come through, so that you can join her in her couples therapy. And to know that, we can break down song by song, we could go through and just point out the brilliance that is these women and what they put out into the world, but also to identify and understand, first of all, the vulnerability of speaking on your diagnosis or your struggles, or the combination of your struggles with a diagnosis in your life, to put that in your art, to put that out there, to make that the focus, especially with Miss Snow the Product. The first song I've heard of hers was Snooze, and it is the first one, like, immediately hooked, like, oh, we think the same. And that's something that I like to appreciate with people who are very, they're either being oversold on their lack of mental and cognitive training that makes them think they have ADHD. And again, no doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not ever trying to diagnose anybody or speak on anybody else's experience. My experience with unmedicated and undiagnosed ADHD into incorrectly medicated and incorrectly diagnosed medication that allows for me to understand the significance of whether or not, people are like, do I have ADHD? Like, there's a way to find that out, and you should definitely seek professional help and be able to find a diagnosis that aligns with your experience. But to know the way that I approach it and the way that we approach this conversation here as, pedestrians who have been in the world of this needing to understand. Like, I'm not sitting out there being an ADHD success story. I'm not. I am a mental and cognitive success story of understanding how therapy allowed for me to decide how my thinking works. It's so for my understanding with ADHD specifically, and again, that's Miss Paris Hilton's bread and butter of knowing what she had and how to address that with her doctor, and she's brought that to us. Miss Snow the Product does the same with her interpretation of her time management, of her understanding of her emotional dysregulation, and the way that thinking does that. Not the fact that she's not smart or can't keep focus. It's that's what either the emotions affect that, or that affects you emotionally, and it makes things difficult. It makes dysregulation more prominent in your life. And the way that I've learned to regulate my understanding of that for myself, because I've always identified as ADD or ADHD. I've been diagnosed incorrectly as that since a wee lad with no medications or no therapies or no treatments, just like, oh, he's hyperactive, oh, he's this, oh, he's that. That happened to a lot of people from my era, and that happened to and a lot of people are now discussing it because it was a very overdiagnosed thing. You know, whether people want to live in the pharmaceutical world of them trying to sell drugs, or the fact that like there was a shift of product, a shift of media, a shift of access and availability to commercials, to infomercials, to multiple channels, to multiple medias at the same time in your own privacy as well. Because back in, 20 years before I was born, 20, 30 years before I was born, you had one media device, a TV or a radio, and all 6 or 7 or however many members of the family all sat around and looked at it. Not even Norman Rockwell, like you fought over that shit because somebody needed that channel at that moment. Like it was a different time. It was a different way that our brains were programmed to think. So I bring that to the conversation to say there's multiple versions of thinking and processing that can reflect in a deficit of concentration or attention. It's the way I look at it is like it's either in your DNA, you were born this way, which is a condition, or it's the way that your brain processes thought in training because of the way that your environment is. And that's then you've been conditioned to think in a deficit of attention or focus, and that is your condition, not the condition of ADHD. Something for every individual to be able to discuss with their doctor and take that on their way, because I'm not trying to get into that conversation. We're trying to bring the conversation of the duality of both, because both can be true and both can be active together at the same time. So you can have ADHD and be medicated and be working on it, and you can be victim just like the rest of the world with the inundated messaging and short clip and soundbite segment thinking conditioning that the world has put us into. Both things are true. Both things can happen. Again, one of them, from my understanding and the way that I've been able to separate the way that my thinking works and how I focus my ADHD training, because there is a version of thought that requires you to be able to condition and train yourself into longer thinking. For me, it's like with ADHD, it's like there's a thought bubble and it goes out into 5 different thoughts. And then for people who don't have ADHD, there's like one bubble and it moves to each thought along the way in like a linear fashion, and they can go back and forth between all of them. But with ADHD, you have your one thought bubble, and if you reach out to one other segment of thought, then you cannot access the other ones without extreme thought or action or strife or struggle. And you learn to adapt around that as opposed to being able to move in a continuous and forward thinking pattern. And then you can understand how one is the way that your brain developed, and the other one is the way that your brain learned to develop around thought and around media and information. And again, both can be true and both might be happening, but we want to bring that significance and that delineation of how we can separate same concepts, because we want to identify that within your therapy showing. We're looking for mindful emotional awareness. We're looking for cognitive flexibility. We're looking for the shift of like where you think something's about to go and then they take it to another place because they've been there before or they understand. And to know that about Miss Snow the Product with her lyrics, which keep me up and down and off and right and left and up and center, because it's also on some reggaeton and some hot beat, but to know that the difference, like she's putting it out there, like, hey, this took me a long time to think about, and some of the other songs are more like, hey, this is how things are. And so we want to break that stereotype of singular thought. Like for therapy showing, we're focused on mindful emotional awareness, cognitive flexibility, and emotionally driven behavior management. And then to know that we're going to have to siphon through, is this smarts? Is this street smarts? Is this intelligence? Is this wisdom? How do we know that about these people? Like they're not giving us all of that meat to the backstory of how they get to the decision that they put out into the world for us to be able to not only relate to, but learn from. And Miss Doja Cat puts the emphasis for some of the main things. She's the way that I learned her. Not only are her words smart, the flow is so intoxicating that I had to ask myself, like, no, do I need to know? Am I just gay, or am I gay, or am I just angry? I need to know now. I had to cognitively, flexibly ask when my brain went, did she say what? And so to know that she's offering those types of just tidbit of cute but significant knowledge of therapy and of cognitive flexibility, like that is also that's a that's a poetic way to offer context, but also like we can, like, that's what I'm picking out of that. I'm saying, okay, that's a moment where she's offering like I grasped some cognitive flexibility in her question, whether she meant and intended to impose that or not, but also her mindful emotional awareness of understanding that, I mean, she's added some therapeutic conversation in a lot of her music, especially this most recent album. But to know the difference of, like, it's all right to be honest. That's an emotionally driven management. Like, because it sounds to me like we were about to not be honest. And then she's saying, it's all right to be honest. And I'm like, oh my God, it is. And in fact, that is one of the things, like, it's one of the sentences that was in my original journals where I'm not a dishonest person. I lived in false environment. I lived with liars and manipulators that required you to carry the lie, whether you realized it or not. It happens to a lot of people in religion, religious trauma, therapy trauma, medical trauma, the the institutional abuse that goes with hiding or lying or pretending you're okay when you're not. That type, like that was a thing that I had to engage with for honesty, because I also, my ADHD requires me to be living in the direct moment, and to have to filter myself from not saying what I actually saw in a place or a time or whatever, because because that spectrum knowledge starts coming through. But to know that that somebody, like, had to sit down and say to themselves, like, it's all right to be honest, and put it down behind some music, and then put it out there for us. That had to be processed. That had to be thought about. That type of awareness is not just random. And so we're going to continue to look through the media that I consume to be able to identify this. And the idea is, like, I don't need you to go out there and know. I do need you to go out there and listen and know the product. Like, immediately twice. And also Doja Cat, who goes by Amala, I'm gonna guess, which is, I looked that up because I wanted to know their name. And like, my first thought was Mamala Kamala and Amala out here giving us the mindful, emotionally aware lessons that we need in their lyric, in their song. So the idea of separating concept from therapy and identifying what we know as either intelligence, information, knowledge, and wisdom, having the skill to navigate between all of these offers your executive function, your reaction, and your response of your interpretation of anything in any moment. It gives you ownership and leadership of yourself to be in that moment. A lot of us don't have that. A lot of us spout off immediately. A lot of us, like, your poker face, your poker face shines through, and people are able to either manipulate or navigate their own intention or their own experience. And to be able to produce or perform that type of understanding in a conversation or while listening to others specifically, that, to me, like, being in therapy, go to betterhelp.com, talk to a therapist, talk to your friends who are in therapy. They'll let you know, like, therapy is not the thing. It's a thing. It's a class. It's a school. It's a lesson. You learn a thing and you learn about things. If you're not, then your therapist is probably not working directly with you, either on cognitive behavioral technique, or you're in talk therapy and what they're trying to do is give you a space to journal your thoughts in a verbal format. And then they take all that down. That's why journaling is so important for therapy work, because you can get all that out there and look back 6 weeks later, just like they do, and go like, oh, well, and now that I understand that, mine does not reflect in the same way of, like, needing to be made aware or finding revelation within my own thought. I'm pretty present focused. And it took me 6 years to get there. And I got 30 more years worth of work to look back on, because I've been a consistent journaler. I've been consistent with my autobiographical memory and knowing where I'm at and what I'm doing, and knowing what was going on, but now figuring out why or what my response was. That thing about where they say, well, how does that make you feel? It's not about you finding out how it makes you feel. It's about you reminding yourself that you don't know that. and that you need to do that work and look at that question. And it's a really hard fucking question to look into, because nobody cares about how, like, you already knew how that felt in the moment. You're not trying to go back to that, whether it was good and if it was positive, then you are trying to go back to that. And you're probably already living in that good feeling, or you're really pissed off that you're not. And that's just how the brain works. But therapy helps you learn that. It helps you learn the time. It helps you learn that time is necessary. It helps you learn techniques, what to do during that time until you get to where you need to go mentally or emotionally, and then how to make that time for yourself, how to prioritize that time, and to discern which one of these skills of either instruction or is like Miss Doja Cat is obviously street smart. She literally has a song called Street Smart. This is one of my most played songs on Spotify. So so you got to think. You got to think about what she's trying to do to you in her wording, because she is so smart that the therapy is encrypted. You got to be able to siphon that out. You got to be able to find it, and find it in the conditioning of the way that she's put her words together. Miss Snow gives it to us a little bit more like on the table. Like her ADHD is to blame for all the childish shit, and she knows it, and she's learned from it, and now does not allow that. And she put that out there in the leadership of, hey, yeah, you can be that. I was that too, but this is what you do about it, and now we have to live by this standard. She took ownership of that conversation. She took stewardship of the lessons that needed to be learned and put them on a sick beat and gave it all to us. And that instruction it was very necessary for me to hear someone like that say it in that way, that offered the time and the space to reflect on not only my own thoughts, but like somebody with that level of lyric genius, if they're saying this is the thing that they had to do, and I experienced that myself, I'm going to take that in. I'm going to take that response. I'm going to understand that this now is key for my understanding of how people address their own therapy, how they reveal that, how they feel comfortable or not revealing that, in the verbiage that they use to emphasize what they're experiencing or what they've learned. And that, for a lot of like, when you listen to something, you can be like, oh, that's not like, they were going through something that I don't relate to that emotion. And then when you find somebody else who's spouting off, the things that they think or feel, and you relate to every single word in the process, almost as if they like stole your journals and read them out loud. Then you learn that like, you learn to interpret that either as an advocate for yourself, like, oh, this person aligns with me. They advocate for me. I'm going to listen to them. I'm going to follow them. Or the awareness that says like, oh, I see what they're on. I caught your vibe, sis. And so to know that that's what we're bringing to the conversation when it comes to your therapy showing, and knowing whether that's a positive or negative, because sometimes you might not have it all worked out. And that's the glory of therapy, to be able to keep going back to the same classroom with the same teacher who has a little bit, hopefully a little bit of experience and a lot of bit of certification and state board qualifications that say that they're qualified to be able to help you in that conversation of learning. Because they're not going to give you the tool. They're not going to give you the skill. Their job is to stabilize you into a place to learn about the things that help you with that specific type of management. And I wrote that out again in the way that I said, like again, I'm no therapist. I'm not a doctor. I'm very experienced with what used to be considered normal and what is, because there was a lot of misinformation in the 80s and 90s that did not carry into today. Other people are living their entire lives with all of this knowledge, and they left just the millions of us out there without the Ritalin prescription, but all of the fucking problems. And to know that there is a mindful emotional awareness response, and that we bring that obligation to ourselves. Like, hey, mindful emotional awareness, whether you know it or not, is already going on, and it requires a response. And there's a bunch of other people putting their work out there that are letting you know that, and we're bopping along to it without that intention. And if you just put a little bit of extra thought into the thing that you're listening to, or to the thing that you're hearing, or to the things that the people that you love are presenting to you, maybe you'll find that meal in there that they're meant for you to have, that Easter egg. Maybe that mindful emotional awareness from them will pop through, and you might not hear it today, but it might catch you another time that says, I'm going to take that moment. I'm going to understand what's going on before I allow. And then to be cognitively flexible in that, oh my gosh, like that, to understand that you can ask a different question. You can ask yourself a different question. You can bring a different version of the conversation to yourself in the moment. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of understanding. It takes a lot of other people wanting to tell you what you're going to do or where you're going to be. And then for you to look at yourself and say, I know better. I know different. You're not always going to understand that. You're not always going to understand how to be honest with yourself about that. But as Miss Doja Cat says, it's all right to be honest. And you're going to learn that. You learn that through all the times that you're not honest with yourself, not talking about going out there and bearing false witness, doing the wrong thing or doing the different thing that you didn't want to do, and learning how that makes you feel on the inside and learning how to respond to that. That is what therapy teaches you. And that's what we look for as we engage with those who are showing this to us. Their therapy is showing, and so is ours. And again, I'm John Nathan, and we appreciate y'all listening here as we engage with our Your Therapy is Showing soliloquy of those that we have highlighted. And this week, we are proud to report Miss Snow the Product and Miss Doja Cat. Your therapy is showing, and we appreciate it so much. And again, we want to close with this little titty that we wrote today, this little tidbit here. Therapy helps you learn time and technique to discern which one of these is the communication, and offers time and space to reflect on your responses and how you would like to respond. It's more than an awareness, it's a formula. It's an equation. It's an understanding that there are choice and option, and that you're going to do one thing and you're going to wish you would have done another, or you're going to do one thing and you're going to be glad with what you did. And therapy teaches you that both of those things can be thought about and can be added to your own personal library of awareness and understanding. And the more you do that intentionally, the more that those decisions and alternative actions become your responses. And they become responses that you're not only proud of, but you're proud of the awareness of your intentional response. All right, we'll see y'all next time.